one of the most suspenseful diary pages ever. I think this is better than watching a dramatised adaptation. Oh, this is the really exciting part. Hi, I hope you're well. I'm very excited because I found out this morning that the Griffith Institute at the University of Oxford has just published a digitised version of all of Howard Carter's archaeological journals from his Valley of the Kings excavations, or specifically Tutankhamun's tomb. And they are on the Tutankhamun Spatial Archive at tutankhamun.griffith.ox.ac.uk, and I'll pop the link in the description box. But I am now going to be exploring their website and reading a bit more about Howard Carter. I know a bit about his background, but I just wanted to be able to contextualise these journals in with some information about him. I do have another book about him and his work before he found Tutankhamun's tomb, but I'm going to be doing either a more detailed article or a series of articles over on my Substack in the future. So I am going to be delving deeper into this in the next few weeks. But for now, I'm just going to explore the website and take you along for the journey. I'm going to share with you what I find fascinating and just have fun doing an exploration of some archaeology. Which sounds weird because I'm sitting at my desk, but that's what it feels like. It feels like I'm digging deep into excavating and exploring the history, the more detailed and archived version, but also maybe a bit more of the personal side of doing one of the most famous excavations in the history of archaeology and Egyptology. So I've got my camera up here and I've got my camera here, and I'm gonna just show you what I find. Okay, so looking at the website, it is copyrighted to the Griffith Institute, so I'm not going to show you a close-up of any of the images on the screen. I highly recommend that you go and have an explore yourself. So the homepage says that it has the archaeological journals created by Howard Carter and Arthur Mace, who was another archaeologist, and those were from seasons 1 to 9. Howard Carter's diaries from seasons 1 to 3, and Minnie Burton's personal diary, that was from the date or from the year of the discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb in 1922 through to 1926. So I don't know much at all about Minnie Burton, so I've gone onto the page on the Griffith Institute website, and it says that she was the wife of Harry Burton, and Harry Burton was an archaeologist and a photographer for the Tutankhamun excavation. And it says that from 1922 to 1926, she kept a diary whose daily entries record social engagements and memorable events, including the excavation of the tomb of Tutankhamun. It details her life with Harry at home in Florence, their stays in Egypt, especially in Luxor, but also in Cairo, their trip across the United States and to Hollywood in 1924, and various holidays in Europe. That sounds fascinating. Can you imagine what Hollywood was like in 1924? So the journals and diaries of Minnie Burton and Howard Carter and Arthur Mace cover the actual excavation of Tutankhamun's tomb from 1922 onwards, rather than the period searching for the tomb in the Valley of the Kings. Now, I know that Howard Carter was working really hard to find Tutankhamun's tomb. He had some evidence that the tomb of Tutankhamun was somewhere in the Valley of the Kings, but he was working really hard to find it. And Tutankhamun's tomb was very difficult for Howard Carter and his team to find, because the entrance to it had obviously been concealed, as were all of the entrances to the tombs in the Valley of the Kings. But even then, it was even harder to find because it was actually built upon by later kings. The tomb of Ramesses V, which was then also later used by Ramesses VI, was then also built so close to it that it kind of concealed the entrance to Tutankhamun's tomb. Now, the information that I am providing here, some of it is just from memory, some of it is from the Complete Valley of the Kings book by Nicholas Reeves and Richard H. Wilkinson. That's a Thames and Hudson book, which I love. And also the Theban Mapping Project website, which is a wonderful website. So it details the tombs that are known in the Valley of the Kings, the Valley of the Queens, and the Western Wadis, and other sites. So I do recommend that you have an explore on that website. It's linked in the description. And this is a really valuable resource that I use to do my Valley of the Kings video. So now I'm just going to have a look through all of the journals that are on the Griffith Institute website, and I'm going to let you know all of the fun things that I find. Okay, so I've only spent a couple of minutes looking at these pages. I haven't actually properly read any of them yet, but I've already got first impressions. So the first thing is that it's really cute. The handwriting is really small and neat, not the easiest thing to read, but they have got a typed transcription, which is great. And so I will be using that. Unfortunately, I can't read all of his handwriting. The front cover is page 1, and then it goes straight through to page 25, which I think is odd. Why does it not have the other 24 pages? So I wonder what was on those. But the paper is squared paper, as in square grid lines on the paper, which is really nice because that's one of my favourite types of paper to use. As a stationery nerd, that makes me happy. The diary, the first page of the first journal, goes from the 28th of October 1922. And it goes through to the 5th of November. And this is important because this is only a week, less than a week or so, before they actually discovered Tutankhamun's tomb, which was on the 4th of November 1922. So this particular journal covers the immediate period before the discovery, or rather at the very beginning of when they found the first steps down to the tomb, which is just so exciting if you can imagine actually being there. This diary helps to bring you into that scenario in your imagination, and then the actual famous day when he discovered the tomb, when he actually was able to crack it open and go inside. This diary it's like a dated diary. It's October the 28th, this happened. October the 29th, this happened. And sometimes it's one line, and sometimes it's a whole paragraph or 2 paragraphs. So on October the 28th, he arrived back in Luxor. Then he went back to the West Bank of Thebes, or West Bank of Luxor as it's known in modern times, and on November the 1st they started operations in the Valley of the Kings. They continued the former excavation where it had stopped at the northeast corner of the entrance to the tomb of Ramesses V. So Ramesses V's tomb is the one that was immediately sort of above Tutankhamun's, that covered the entrance to his tomb. How exciting that after all of that time, when they'd worked so hard to try to find it, that almost immediately they were there ready to actually find it, that they were about to find the first signs that it was there. So from November the 1st, Howard Carter and his team are clearing some ancient workmen's huts that are there near the entrance of Ramesses VI's tomb. And that takes a few days. So then on November the 4th at 10 o'clock, underneath one of the first huts that they had to remove, they found the first traces of the entrance of the tomb of Tutankhamun. This comprised the first step at the northeastern corner of a staircase that was going below the ground level. Quite a short time sufficed to show that it was the beginning of a steep excavation cut in the bedrock, about 4 meters below the entrance of Ramesses VI's tomb. And they could see that it was of the nature of a sunken staircase entrance to a tomb of the type of the 18th dynasty, but that it had lots of rubbish in the entranceway and they had to clear it away. How exciting and how frustrating at the same time that he was so close and yet they just had to do some more clearing to be able to get there. And then the next day, on November the 5th, it says, towards sunset we had cleaned to the level of the 12th step, which was sufficient to expose a large part of the upper portion of a plastered and sealed doorway. So this is how they concealed the doorway, so that hopefully anybody walking through the Valley of the Kings wouldn't actually be able to tell there was a tomb there, so that hopefully the king's burial would remain undisturbed, because throughout Egyptian history the tombs of the kings and the tombs of non-royals had just been robbed and kings' mummies probably destroyed, so it was so important for them to try to keep these tombs secret, safe from robbers. It didn't actually really work very well. A lot of the tombs in the Valley of the Kings were robbed, and although we think that Tutankhamun's tomb wasn't robbed because it was intact, it had actually been robbed a couple of times. It's just that the robbers were interrupted, and so they didn't actually remove much of what was in there, mainly some jewellery. It says in the journal here that they had enough evidence to see that it really was the entrance of a tomb, and by the seals, to all outward appearances, that it was intact. Now, they didn't know that the robbers had managed to get in, so they thought it was intact. So that was just page 1. This must be one of the most suspenseful diary pages ever, because, and that might be an exaggeration, but obviously we know what comes next. So I'm just on tenterhooks to read the rest. So let's go to the next pages of this journal. This is actually page 27, and it is a continuation of November the 5th. So they've already spent most of the day clearing the staircase. And so they must have done a lot of work that day, because this is a big section. This whole page is just November the 5th continued. I think this is better than watching a dramatised adaptation of the discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb, because it's Howard Carter's own words, his impressions of what it was like discovering this tomb and confirming that it was what he hoped it was, that he had worked for so long. So Carter thought and hoped that the fact that The entrance of the tomb had been covered by the workmen's huts from about the date of the construction of Ramesses VI's tomb, which was one of the last tombs to be built in the Valley of the Kings, meant that hopefully Tutankhamun's tomb had been undisturbed at least since the 20th dynasty. And he was right. Actually, this is one of the reasons why Tutankhamun's tomb was as intact as it was. It had been robbed, but not during the 20th dynasty, which is when a lot of the robberies happened, that period and slightly afterwards. So it had been protected from the robbers and the state emptying of tombs and the state moving of royal mummies because of these workmen's huts that were built over the entrance. They were built on top of all this old ancient rubbish, which is what filled in the staircase, and then the huts had been built on top of it. So at this point, Howard Carter is hoping that this is the tomb of Tutankhamun, but it says the seal impressions suggested that it belonged to somebody of high standing, but at that time I had not found any indications as to whom. The majority of the people who were buried in the Valley of the Kings were kings, but the kings could also build tombs for their wives, or maybe their sons, or chosen high officials. So it was probably a king's tomb, but he obviously needed confirmation, and confirmation which king it belonged to. They had already discovered a lot of the tombs in the Valley of the Kings, so they knew it didn't belong to specific kings whose tombs had already been found, but he needs confirmation that it's Tutankhamun's tomb. Oh, I love this bit. So Carter is saying that he made a small hole under the wooden lintel at the top of the door. By this hole I was able to perceive with the aid of an electrical torch that a passage beyond was completely filled with stones and rubble up to its ceiling, which was again evidence of something that had required careful closing. It was a thrilling moment for an excavator, quite alone, save for his native staff of workmen. He's not alone. He's got valuable workmen with him. So it was a thrilling moment for an excavator to suddenly find himself, after so many years of toilsome work, on the verge of what looked like a magnificent discovery, an untouched tomb. With certain reluctance, I reclosed the small hole that I had made. It's like finding the Christmas presents in your parents' wardrobe and peeking at them and not being able to actually look properly. Oh, it's so exciting. Though I was satisfied that I was on the verge of perhaps a magnificent find, probably one of the missing tombs that I had been seeking for many years, I was much puzzled by the smallness of this opening in comparison with those of the other royal tombs in the valley. Its design was certainly of the 18th dynasty. Could it be the tomb of a noble, buried there by royal consent? Or was it a royal cache? As far as my excavations had gone, there was absolutely nothing to tell me. Had I known that by digging a few inches deeper I would have exposed seal impressions showing Tutankhamun's insignia distinctly, I would have fervently worked on and set my mind at rest, but as it was getting late, the night had fast set in, the full moon had risen high in the eastern heavens. I refilled the excavation for protection, and with my men selected for the occasion, they, like myself, delighted beyond all expectation, I returned home and cabled to Lord Carnarvon, then in England, the following message. What is the message? I have to turn the page. At last have made wonderful discovery in valley, a magnificent tomb with seals intact, recovered same for your arrival. Congratulations. But he has to wait for Lord Carnarvon to arrive, because he's his benefactor and he can't open the tomb without him. Oh, I'm reading the next part. And while the men worked hard to cover up the signs that there is a tomb there to protect it, a couple of days after they found the doorway, the news of the discovery spread fast all over the country, and inquisitive inquiries mingled with congratulations from this moment became the daily programme. The next day, so November the 8th, they received a wireless from Lord Carnarvon. And this is the most frustrating thing. Possibly come soon. And then another one. Propose arrive Alexandria 20th. They would have to wait more than 12 more days for Lord Carnarvon. He's going to arrive by boat, which is slow compared to what we're used to now. Arrive in Alexandria on the 20th, and then how long it will take to go up the Nile, which is south, to get to Luxor. That's got to be one of the hardest things to wait for. At least I'm putting my own perspective on this because I know what Carter's actually found, but Carter's not actually sure what's inside. So maybe he wasn't quite as excited as I am, but he should have been. So after Howard Carter had met Lord Carnarvon and his daughter in Cairo, Carter then returned to Luxor within one day, and then the next day Carnarvon left Cairo, and then Carnarvon arrived at Luxor and then stayed at Carter's house. And you can actually visit Carter's house if you go to Luxor, go over to the West Bank, and you can go and visit as a tourist to Howard Carter's house there, which is really cool. On November the 24th, Lord Carnarvon, his daughter, and Howard Carter were ready to see what they had uncovered. The team of archaeologists, including Howard Carter's assistant Arthur Callender, had cleared the rest of the stairway. And so there were 16 steps down, a further 4 from what they had excavated before. And now they could see that there were more seal impressions, including the cartouche of Tutankhamun, and that is what they had been waiting for. Now this is important. It says, in the upper part of this sealed doorway, traces of 2 distinct reopenings and successive reclosings were apparent. So the seal impression that they had found on November the 5th was one of the ones that was used for reclosing. So these were the openings when they realised that people had been robbing the tombs. They had to open it to be able to see what had been robbed and to be able to protect the tomb, and then they closed it again. So the seals that they found were actually from not at the time of Tutankhamun's burial, but slightly after, when the tomb was sealed back up again. So the rest of this paragraph just shows what a tumultuous time they were having. It was like a roller coaster. There must have been so much trepidation that there was too much press around this, that somebody would come and break into and rob this tomb while they were sleeping, that maybe it wasn't the tomb that they were looking for. And it says that they were worried that it had been opened and used more than once, which a lot of the tombs of the Valley of the Kings had been. Later on, they had been opened and emptied, the mummies being removed and put in mummy caches elsewhere in the Theban necropolis, and all of the goods being taken out and either reused or melted down and destroyed. So it was a huge worry for Carter and Carnarvon and the other people who had invested so much time and energy into this excavation. If this tomb was empty like the other ones, they were hoping to find an intact tomb full of treasure, which, as we know now, they did. Howard Carter actually slept in the valley that night. It does remind me of a child sleeping in the living room waiting for Father Christmas to come. So they managed to get through the first doorway on the 25th of November. And then they had to clear 9 meters of descending passage that was full of rubble and other things like broken pot shards and jar seals and things. Some of this was worrying because it looked like it was signs of plundering. But after they cleared 9 meters of this rubble and rubbish, they found a second sealed doorway. This also had seal impressions, and it had evidence of reopenings and reclosings. The seals were of Tutankhamun, but worryingly, the entrance and the passage were similar to the tomb containing the cache of Akhenaten that Theodore Davis had found previously. So they were worried again that they had found a cache and not a tomb. And then it says, this is the really exciting part. Feverishly, we cleared away the remaining last scraps of rubbish on the floor of the passage before the doorway, until we had only the clean sealed doorway before us, in which, after making preliminary notes, we made a tiny breach in the top left-hand corner to see what was beyond. Darkness and the iron testing rod told us that there was an empty space. Perhaps another descending staircase, in accordance to the ordinary royal Theban tomb plan. Or maybe a chamber. Candles were procured, the all-important telltale for foul gases when opening an ancient subterranean excavation. I widened the breach, and by means of the candle looked in, while Lord Carnarvon, Lady Evelyn, and Calendar with the Reeses waited in anxious expectation. It was some time before one could see. The hot air escaping caused the candle to flicker, but as soon as one's eyes became accustomed to the glimmer of light, the interior of the chamber gradually loomed before one, with its strange and wonderful medley of extraordinary and beautiful objects heaped upon one another. You can just see in your mind's eye that famous arrangement of all of the tomb goods that were inside Tutankhamun's tomb, with the bed and the statues and things. There was naturally short suspense for those present who could not see. When Lord Carnarvon said to me, "Can you see anything?" I replied to him, "Yes, it is wonderful." I then, with precaution, made the hole sufficiently large for both of us to see. With the light of an electric torch, as well as an additional candle, we looked in. Our sensations and astonishment are difficult to describe, as the better light revealed to us the marvellous collection of treasures. 2 strange ebony black effigies of a king, gold-sandalled, bearing staff and mace, loomed out from the cloak of darkness. Gilded couches in strange forms, lion-headed, Hathor-headed, and beast infernal. Exquisitely painted, inlaid and ornamental caskets, flowers, alabaster vases, some beautifully executed of lotus and papyrus device, strange black shrines with a gilded monster, snake, appearing from within, quite ordinary-looking white chests, finely carved chairs, a golden inlaid throne, a heap of large, curious white oviform boxes. Beneath our very eyes, on the threshold, a lovely lotiform wishing cup in translucent alabaster, stools of all shapes and design, of both common and rare materials, and, lastly, a confusion of overturned parts of chariots glinting with gold. Peering from amongst which was a mannequin, the first impression of which suggested the property room of an opera house of a vanished civilization. Our sensations were bewildering and full of strange emotion. We questioned one another as to the meaning of it all. Was it a tomb or merely a cache? A sealed doorway between the two sentinel statues proved there was more beyond, and with the numerous cartouches bearing the name Tutankhamun on most of the objects before us, there was little doubt that there behind was the grave of that pharaoh. We closed the hole, locked the wooden grill which had been placed upon the first doorway. We mounted our donkeys and returned home contemplating what we had seen. Wow, that's so cool. Oh, I would have loved to have been there, a fly on the wall watching or taking part. That's amazing. That's so special to be able to read it. It's so nice to be able to have in your mind images of what you've seen in books or TV programs and documentaries and things, of what they found, what they saw, because obviously they took loads of photos and it's been recreated in TV dramas, and the photos have been colorized and you can see all about it in books. You can see the objects in publications of the collections in the museums that they have been housed in. I was lucky enough to actually go to Cairo Museum back in 2010 and to go to the art gallery that the objects were exhibited at in 2019. So I've seen them in person twice, a lot of them, not all of them, I think. I haven't been to the Grand Egyptian Museum. I haven't been back to Egypt since 2010. But we're so familiar with what the tomb looked like and what the actual objects looked like that you can just imagine it in your mind's eye. It's just absolutely incredible. And to read it from Howard Carter's own words, what I was interested in reading this actually is that it's not the famous phrase that Howard Carter was supposed to have said. So what is in my memory that he said when Carnarvon said, "Can you see anything?" He said, "Yes, wonderful things." But it says here, I replied to him, "Yes, it is wonderful." That may not be a direct quote. I assume that there's other versions of this having been written down and reported, or maybe telegraphed somewhere, or written in other people's own journals. But it's really important to have Howard Carter's own words and own record of what he saw and what they did in this excavation, published online for anyone and everyone to read, either from the transcription that I've been using or from actually reading the scans of the handwritten pages. And this is only journal 1, and I am only a few pages in. There's 9 journals from Carter and then more from Minnie Burton. I really recommend that anyone goes and has a look at these. It's been really fascinating to read, and I'm hoping to write some accounts of this on Substack. So if you're interested, my Substack is Notes from an Egyptologist, and my username is @MuseEgyptologyKate. And I write about ancient Egypt and self-learning and things like that. So I will be reading more of these journals, but first I'm going to go make dinner. So I will see you in the next video. I hope you have a lovely week, and if you do want to read the journals, the link is below. I hope you have a lot of fun like I have done today, and I will see you next time. Bye!